Eddie Joe is in the rehab at Craig and is doing better. I don't know how long she'll be there, but she's doing better. We appreciate everyone's prayer on her behalf. Um, Vance, I appreciate his prayer that he prayed for all those who were part of the service this morning. Yeah, I appreciated that. Let me make sure you all understand that you're all part of the service this morning. Every time we meet together, we're all part of the service. We may have different roles, whether that's leading the singing, as Will has done today, or saying a prayer, singing out loud, or just praying for one another. We all have a role to pray. All have a role to play, to do in our service, every one of us. And I appreciate it. I appreciate that we do that here. It is a great comfort. Because we meet every week. We get together and we sing praises and we listen to songs and prayers and sermons, and we get together and we share our problems, we share our joys, we share our burdens, and sometimes maybe we can help one another heal just a little, just by being a family. And that's one of the things as we are a family here, and I appreciate everyone. And it's always good to come home to a family. And that's good. And I appreciate that. And we did. And I'm glad. But we also come to remember. We come to remember Christ. We come to remember that He gave His life. Not only on the cross. We want to remember that He gave His life on the cross, but He gave His life every day. He lived His life as a sacrifice for all mankind. And we see there in Romans where it says, make your bodies a living sacrifice. Every day, make yourself a sacrifice. And we see that example with Jesus, that every day He gave His life as a sacrifice for us. But it's not just what He did every day. It's also that night before He was crucified, He gave us that remembrance, the blood of the covenant that He gave, the new covenant. That this is my blood, the blood of the covenant. We want to remember that. And we've been looking at covenants a little bit in our lessons lately. We've looked at a couple in the Old Testament. We've talked a little bit about Jesus and the new covenant. And that word covenant is not something we talk about all the time. That's not something that comes up. When's the last time you used the word covenant in a conversation? It doesn't happen. And usually, when we think of the word covenant, we kind of make that equal to a contract. It is not. A covenant is not a contract. A contract is where two people reach an agreement. It may be that I agree to perform some sort of labor and you agree to pay me a wage. Or maybe I have a cow that I agree to sell to Blackie and he agrees to pay for it. That there's an agreement on both sides. That you come together and you reach an agreement and then you perform. But the thing about it is, if we have an agreement that you'll pay me so much for me to do this kind of work, if I don't do the work, you don't have to pay me because I didn't perform. And if I never deliver that cow to Blackie, Blackie doesn't have to pay me. And if he doesn't pay me, I don't have to deliver that cow. You have that exchange, that they are in agreement, and the two of you can agree on an equal amount. And whatever you agree on is good. And over, I can assure you, I have a case practically every day about a breach of contract. Usually it's a debt case that someone says he agreed to pay and he hadn't paid. And I gave him the loan or I gave him the house and he hasn't paid for it. And I want to bring a lawsuit. It happens all the time. You don't have that with a covenant. Covenants do not come through the court. They are not subject to the civil authorities or the judge that may be there. A covenant is not based on me agreeing to do something and you agreeing to pay me. That's not the way it works. A covenant is you agree to do something no matter what. The example that comes to my mind is always a family, or particularly with children, is we may not have a formal covenant with our children, but we love our children, no matter what. And it may be that they don't always do what we like. They may not always love us in return. But I have seen over and over and over. Someone will be in the courtroom and they may be tried for a bad crime, horrible crime. No question they did it. But when it comes time, usually mama is there asking for mercy for their child because they love them, even when they may have been mistreated themselves. That covenant of love between a parent and a child is always there. And it's not dependent upon the two of them agreeing. Now there may be consequences. We all know that sometimes you've got to discipline your children. That's just part of it. There may be consequences to the one party or the other not living up to their covenant. But there are always that covenant of love and that commitment to perform no matter what the other person does. You know, we've looked at covenants, and we looked at one in the Old Testament. This is one back where we had the flood. And God says, when I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you, and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. Now we see this is a covenant between God and all of creation. Not just between God and man, but all of creation. That when God sees the rainbow, he will remember. It's not so that we will remember. The Bible tells us it's up there for God to remember. And that he has said, I will never do this again. No matter what humanity does. No matter what creation does. God is committed to creation. Another one we saw was with Abraham. And we see that God covenants with Abraham, and he says, Abraham, you go to a foreign land, and I will give you descendants. I will give you a great name, and I will give your descendants land. But he also says, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And when we look at that, we see, and we've talked about this, but I want to get it in our minds, that God blessed Abraham and his people, and all of his children, the whole family. But why? So that they would be a blessing to others. And that's the same thing that happens with us. God was covenanted with Abraham and his family. I will bless you, and you will be a blessing. That they became partners in that covenant. That God offered that and invited them into covenant, saying, I will bless you, and you will bless others. And we're in that same situation. How many of us are not blessed? I know some people, we all have problems, and some of us have more than others. And we have people that are in the hospital or are going through treatments and all those kind of things. I'm not trying to lessen any of that. But we all know that we are blessed. And as blessed people, we want to be partners with God and to share those blessings with others, to make sure that we pass that on. You know, have you ever thought that one of the things that God promised Abraham was land? How much land did Abraham have when he died? He had one burial plot for him and Sarah. That's all the land he owned at the time of his death. Now, we know that his descendants come back into the land of Canaan, the promised land, and they get land. They have it. That promise is fulfilled. But it always amazes me that Abraham lived his life not only expecting many descendants, and he ends up with Esau and Isaac, but he also has been promised land. And all he has is that burial plot where he buries Sarah, and then his children bury him. And that shows his faith. So when we talk about the covenant that God had with Abraham, we see that it was fulfilled, but not necessarily in the same time that Abraham would have expected. And today we're going to look at another covenant. We're going to be looking at Joshua chapter 24. This is the last chapter in the book of Joshua. And we know that Joshua is the successor to Moses. That when Moses doesn't get to go into the promised land, that they have to have a new leader, and that is Joshua. And he leads them into the land, and there's the conquest of Canaan, and Joshua leads them in that conquest, and then he divides the land up amongst the tribes. He has a very important role. But in chapter 23 of Joshua, we learn that Joshua's about to die. And this is going to be, chapter 24 is going to be his last sermon to the people. And that's one of the things we see over and over in the Bible, is that last time to talk, that final words, the farewell discourse, those final words of someone before they die. You know, when Jacob is in Egypt, he's getting ready to die, he brings all of his sons in, and he gives them that last lesson that he talks to them about. When Moses is about to die, right before the people are lined up to cross the Jordan River to go into the promised land, and Moses knows that he knows he's about to die, he gives them his final sermon, which is the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy is his final sermon to the people. It's also the first sermon that we have in the Bible. Now, I know there are some of you who shall remain nameless that are thinking, Deuteronomy is a long book. We're hoping Stuart gives a sermon quite that long today. And we'll just have to wait and see on that. But that would be a long sermon. But it's a good one. We see David on his deathbed talking to Solomon, giving those final words about how to secure the kingdom for our line. And of course, we also see Jesus. On the night before he's crucified, he gives his disciples those final words, that farewell discourse, particularly in the book of John. And we see over and over that Jesus talks to us right before he dies. And let's not forget that when we see John 17, what does it tell us? Not only to you am I talking, but to all those who believe because of you. Which Jesus is talking to us. And that amazes me. That is a humbling thought. That Jesus, on the night that he died, preached a sermon to us. Give us our final words. But here in chapter 24, Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel. And they presented themselves before God. That he caused all the people, not just the judges, but I'm glad the judges got included in that, just because, it's just good that they did one thing right over time. But we have the judges and the leaders and the officers and all the people of Israel have gathered together to hear Joshua's last words. And they are gathered together at Shechem. One of the ways that in Hebrew they emphasize things is they repeat them. They bring things up. And we see that at Shechem, a lot of things happen at Shechem. It is that's not what I want. No, I'm going the wrong way. There's Shechem. It's in the middle. As you can see, it's north of Jerusalem and Jericho, and yet it's south of the Sea of Galilee, so it's kind of right in the middle of the Promised Land. And you probably can't tell on that map, or actually it looks like pretty good, as you can see that Shechem is between two mountain ranges. And so if you want to go from the north to the south, you come to Shechem. And this is where Joshua has gathered the people. But also when you see here, when you look at Scripture, you notice that other things have happened here at Shechem. Back when we talked about Abraham getting that covenant with God, it tells us there in Genesis 12, Abraham passed through the lands to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. So we have Joshua gathering the people at Shechem, where Abraham, their forefather, had put up an altar to God. And we see how that is important to the people. We would remember that. That place is an important place. And I think of that. That Joshua is bringing up the past. He's bringing the past into the present so that they will remember. And we have that same thing. We may not go quite as old as they do, but this is also our history. We are part of that same history that they are. We don't often think about that Jewish history is our history, but it is. It's part of our religious history. But we also have history here. Or it may be a different place, a different congregation, a different building. But we have those history and that memory. We have the memory of sermons from Bright and Don for many years that taught us all. We have the memory of being in class with Mary Ruth or Chloanne or someone else. That we have those memories, that foundation. Blackie was telling us on Sunday night how he remembered that when he would go to visit a family, there was a particular family that he would occasionally visit. And every day when he would go and he would spend the night there, the next morning there would be a devotion before they left the house. That we all have those family members that helped us. That foundation that we have. That very much of the past being part of our presence. And I think that's good that we remember. I'm not saying that all of us have the perfect past. That we all have fond memories. Some of us may not. But we all have that foundation that keeps us going. And Joshua is appealing to the people, bringing up this Shechem and telling the story. And he tells them the story of what God has done, reminds them of what God has done. But then he comes to a point, and he tells them, as he's talking to all the people at Shechem, Joshua says, "Now therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that our fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." So Joshua is giving them this opportunity to choose. And when Moses gave his final discourse there, his final sermon in Deuteronomy, he tells the people, he urges them to choose life. You have a choice. Choose life. Joshua here says, choose this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, I think it amazing that we are here on the river and we've seen everything that God has done. And still, Joshua urges them to choose. And that's something that we are faced with every day. Is choose this day, today, whom you will serve. And he talks about if you don't want to serve the Lord, then you serve these other gods. Whether that's the ones with the Amorites or back in Egypt or across the river, there are other people if you want to serve. But you choose today whom you will be. And we know from Scripture that the people too choose the Lord. They choose to covenant with the Lord. The Lord is offering to them that you will be my people and I will be your God, and we will partner together. But he also says, Joshua tells them, put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt and serve the Lord. Put away the gods that your fathers served. Now, one of the things that we see is we think when we think of the people back here that, it would be an idol to Baal or maybe to Dagon or Mithras or Isis or maybe Zeus with the Greek gods. They had all these gods. And usually they would have an idol or some sort of monument. And they said, put that aside. And we said, well, that's not so hard. We're not praying to Zeus. We're not putting out the idol to Baal. So we can do that. But let me ask you something. What gods do you need to put away? Maybe it's not a statue to Dagon or Baal. But maybe it's a temptation that you struggle with. And one of the things I think of when I think of this, I think of Jesus when he goes to the wilderness and he's tempted. The devil first of all tempts him physically. Turn this into bread, we know you're hungry. And then he tempts him with the idea of we want you to have glory. Jump off the temple and you'll survive it. You'll be famous. Or maybe it's power. Bow down and worship me and I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world. And when we look at those type situations, I think it comes a little more closer to home. Maybe it is a situation that I'm worshiping my retirement account, and I'm glad I have it. I'm not hiding that, but I don't want to worship it. Or maybe it is like the physical part. You have a physical pleasure. Maybe it's eating too much, and I could certainly fall into that category. That you have a physical desire that you indulge in, that you put ahead of God that you need to watch. Or maybe it's your position in the community that you want to have that little piece of power. No matter how big you may get, whether you're the president or whether you're the king or whatever it may be. It's always tempting and fleeting. But we see all those examples, just like Jesus went through. What gods do you need to put away? What gods do you need to bury? Because we all have them. We all have our temptations. Sometimes they're very seductive. And I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect by any means. I'm not. I have fallen just like everyone else. And I still struggle. But God gives you that choice. Choose this day whom you will serve. And I want to be able to say, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Not working, is it? We've talked about Shechem and how the altar of the Lord was there and how they had this history at this location of Shechem. But let's also look at Genesis 35. This goes back to Jacob. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, so that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. Then we're going to look at verse 4. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had and the rings that were in their ears. Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. So we see that their forefather, Abraham, had built an altar at this location. And we see that Jacob had buried gods at this very location. And now Joshua has all the people gathered together, and he says, we are here at Shechem, and put away your foreign gods. And I think one of the things is that the people of Israel, they'd come into the land, and they had seen that it's a bountiful land. There's lots of fruits and crops, and it's a bountiful land. And they see the native people are praying to Baal. There was a storm god, and they got rain. It's doing well. So I think there was a lot of attempts there to say, oh, well, we still want to worship God. Sure, we're going to do the sacrifices. We're going to do that. But we're also going to pay a little respect to Baal, because it seems like they get some rain when they need to. And sometimes I feel like I'm almost in that situation. I get so concerned with how much rain we have, and I know it's important. I want good pasture. I want good crops. But let's not put that ahead of God. Let's remember who we are. Let's remember what God is offering. Let's remember that God is offering to partner with us, just like He did with Abraham, just like He did with these people. The God of the universe, the creator of the universe, the Lord of lords, the King of kings, offers to partner with us, to covenant with us. That we have this opportunity every day to make a decision that I am choosing the Lord. I will serve the Lord. And by doing that, we are partnering with God in His mission here on earth. That is almost scary. But it's one that gets our attention, or at least it should. And I ask you today, as we get ready, we're going to have the invitation song, and then we are going to remember Jesus. We're going to remember His death on the cross, and we're going to remember that every day He lived His life as a sacrifice for us. That He is asking us, He's inviting us to covenant with Him. He's inviting us to partner with Him. That as we are blessed, we will be a blessing to others. Whether that is feeding a hungry person, or whether that's preaching a sermon, or whether that's giving a little love and a hug. This is different, but the other night when we were at up here, they were telling stories that night. And Pat Chesser, and that Pat Chesser, he was saying when you come to Headley, you will get a hug. And he pointed to Mary Ruth. if you come to Headley, you'll get a hug, and you will. And if you come here, we want to be part of your life, and we want you to be a part of ours. And so at this time, remember that God is asking you to choose every day. Choose today and every day who you will serve. And God is offering to partner with us. And if you have a need, we ask that you come. If you want to put on the Christ in baptism, we ask that you come. Or if we can do something else, we ask that you come while we stand and as we sing.